What up, y'all? What up? All praise. I've been sitting still searching for God. It's gone great. Easy street is peace to the hands of relief like all state. How can I lose? It's proven, of course, I'm all pace. We all one energy, cross states. That's some bars for y'all. This episode is going to be about God and about spirituality. Um, the funny thing is, we've been talking about God and spirituality this whole time. We've been covering this the whole time. The whole discussion about genuineness, authenticity, the whole discussion about um, perception and the human condition is a conversation about God. And I'm someone, man, I'm speaking to you as someone who was brought into this world, taught, um, taught and raised in the Christian faith. As an adult, I went through a period of atheism as an adult, working on Capitol Hill, seeing the Iraq War, seeing the political system and the failings of humans. I went through a several-year period of atheism, and the person you see before you today is, without a doubt, spiritual and is able to hold the complex paradox of what is and include a spirituality which points to something outside of the material world, outside of the typical material frameworks of science and the stories that we tell each other all of the time, the political discourse and the um, analysis of human behavior. Underneath that, there is something else, and God is a word. God is a word. God is a three-letter word. God is a symbol that represents something much greater, much more complex. Um, we've talked about this. God is truth. God is knowledge. God is love. We've talked extensively about how it's all one thing, right? It's all one thing. Presence, right now. We talked about the dimensions. Um, and it's all one thing. Even in time, time is all now. Time has been split up in parts. We've come up with minutes and hours, and humans have constructed all of these systems to understand time or to coordinate around time, but that it's all now. And so God points to. We also talked about linguistics. We talked about how words are symbols. God is a symbol. So God points to something, and God points to the underlying truth, the connective tissue between all of us who are alive in this moment, and every human and every sentient being that's ever been alive. Is the underlying energy, force, the underlying source underneath it all. Oh God. We got a bunch of bugs out here, yeah. Um, I was attracted to atheism, well, I was drawn to atheism as a contrast, frankly, as a contrast against the stories that I was taught as a child. When I saw when I was in Congress and saw, you know, war, and I saw how our political system worked, and I got familiar with just how dark things can get in this world, the Christian stories didn't make sense to me. The Christian stories of the all-loving God and omnipresent, loving God, where good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people, that didn't make sense to me. It didn't work. And it set me down a really challenging path to try to better understand how the world works. And at that time, atheism made sense to me. And I realize now that's because of contrast. That contrast is brilliantly a part of God. It's a part of what is. It's a part of what is. Let's talk about what is for a second. Let's talk about what is instead of talking about God for a moment. That contrast is a part of what is. The fact that there are Christians and Jews and Muslims and other religious traditions all over the world. The fact that there are people who talk about non-duality, the fact that people who engage in all kinds of spirituality efforts to give language and to delve into a deeper experience with this consciousness. Um, it's powerful. It's powerful to notice that what is, we all have our different experiences from our own different perspectives. We've all been given stories, and the stories that we're given are going to give us the framework and the perspective to understand the world. When we experience the world, we each might be experiencing the exact same thing, but we're all experiencing it and internalizing a different story about what's happening based on the language we have for what's happening. So there's an experience that's occurring, but that we don't receive that experience. We don't internalize an experience except through our predetermined assumptions. I mean, there's a war going on, raging in the Middle East right now, and there are people who assume that this is a good thing or that this is uh, an unavoidable thing, that the next step that Jesus is coming back, or that some kind of miracle is going to happen through this insane violence. Um, that's a story. That's a story. There are people, I was speaking the other day with a Christian friend of mine who yeah, reminded me about the cross and the blood. He had all of these stories about the blood of Jesus and how we are all absolved of our sins, and these are stories. God is everywhere. God is with us. The spiritual, we're pointing when we say something is spiritual, we're not pointing to something outside of what is. At least I'm not. I'm not pointing to something outside of the world. I'm not pointing to something outside of myself. I'm a spiritual being. If you're watching this, you're a spiritual being as well as a material being. Um, One of the most powerful things for me is to realize again when I take seriously this experience and I go outside and I go in my yard and I see all the little animals that are existing in these little ecosystems, and I realize how central they all are to me. Even these bugs that are attacking me here, attacking my feet, I have to keep moving my feet. I have to remind myself that this is all part of a deeply complex knife's edge of interconnected um, phenomena, and it all relies on each other. And things shift and they evolve, but I'm in relationship with it all. I don't exist as an individual unrelated to these other phenomena, whether I'm familiar with them or not, whether I have language for them or not. I talk so much about the breathing. I'm breathing. I'm alive. You're alive, and you breathe without your conscious intention. You do it involuntarily. It happens. You don't do these things you take for granted. You don't control your eyes. expressly in its fullness. You control the direction of where you might pay attention. And as soon as you do it, your eyes go to work interpreting light, interpreting distance, interpreting shadows, giving you a picture that your brain can recreate spatial reality. Breathing has a similar sort of like involuntarily, um, it works and it keeps you alive. And while science can give language to the process, science can give language and names. We can talk about cones and rods. We can talk, if breathing, we can talk about the different parts of the uh, respiratory system and the organs that play. We can talk about carbon dioxide and we can talk about oxygen. That relationship itself and the fact that it works is outside of the realm of science. The fact that it works and the fact that consciousness exists at all is outside of the realm of science. We can give language to something. It doesn't mean that we have a full grasp on how it works. And even the best scientists have to grapple with this and have to make do with this. And because our brains are so capable, we try to give language to things. We try to understand things. And so yeah, we come up with stories to explain things. Again, I can explain the human biology. I could write a whole book about the human biology. I would break it up into different chapters. We have whole uh, disciplines of knowledge that focus on particular parts of the human body. There are doctors who are podiatrists who focus entirely on the feet, doctors who focus entirely on teeth, others focus on the neurology and the brain and the spine. And each of these things, you can go deeply into them and you can develop a deep knowledge on these things as individuals. But then there is a phenomena that emerges from each of these things together. There's a phenomenon that emerges that we call consciousness. That is the full the full sum of those parts plus. And some of that plus is completely beyond our understanding. We try to point to it. We try to you don't want to discard what is one of the problems, like I keep saying, when you tell stories, you are narrowing things, you are carving up things in order to tell a story about the human biology in a book, in a textbook, even at the highest level, you're not, you will have to narrow things down a bit. Um, you have to focus on what you know. You'll have to tell a story about what you can tell a story about. And when science tells its limited story, um, a lot of the other stuff, the mystical, the notions of consciousness, of our interconnectedness, um, the spiritual community tends to pick that up. They tend to pick that up and try to engage with it. And what happens is the more you try to talk about God, the harder it gets in a way, right? Because we're encumbered by language. We are language is going to trip us up as we try to talk about God. If we're talking about God and we're talking about this like perfection, let me do this over. If we're talking about God and we're trying to talk about, people might say, well, where is God? And so when you try to I will tell you that God is everywhere. God is everything. God is in everything. It's in every sentient being, and God, the energy of God, is even in the things that aren't sentient that we created. That God is present in all of these things. Um, it is not a man in the clouds. It is not anthropomorphic at all. When we say he, that's us doing that. Again, back to the stories. That's us doing that. That's us giving the masculine pronoun to something that escapes those gendered stories. Some people, when they want to talk about God and they want to talk about this powerful entity, and you ask where it is, people want to, you have to point to a specific place. And so you want to like remove it from the earth. You look at the earth and you see all this violence and this hatefulness, and you say, oh, well, God is external. And that's certainly part of the Christian story that I was raised with, that there was a split and a separation, that God exists somewhere else. And that's wrong. That's a story. A lot of times I'll watch like these dating shows, Pop the Balloon, or and people talk about how they want a God-fearing couple partner. They want a partner who's God-fearing. That's a story as well. You know, you have to be mindful that we receive these stories, and we get passed down these stories. Our the elders in our community, the pastors, they take up certain language and they repeat certain language, and now you end up repeating this language. There's no, the idea of being God fearing is obviously a cultural phenomenon. And you know, at the very least, if you're going to fear God, you should also love God. God is both. God is all of those things. You know, the way I see it, for the most part, actually, fear is a is a construct, is a human construct that's I guess it's part of the whole thing. It's part of the whole thing. But if you had to talk about like the first relationship with the all being source of the universe, um, I orient it towards love. I orient it towards love rather than fear. Why? Because as I said, so much of this stuff, if you take close stock to what's happening in reality, you like dispense with God for a second and simply look around, look at yourself, and look at all of the different systems at play, the organs in your body that are working without your conscious effort, and not just internally, but the interplay between your body and the external world. Um, the nature of water and how you know how much of a necessity it is for your body and for the world and for the plants and the animals. The knife's edge, the distance between the Earth and the sun and the other planets. Um, the nature of agriculture and plants. You know, you take some earth and some water, some sunlight and some seeds. We've talked about how um, an apple tree takes about 2 or 3 years to grow from a seed, and how you can plant a seed, an apple seed, and tend to it, and that it will produce this enormous mass from this little seed that's about the size of like half my fingernail. Um, these phenomena are, they exist. They are, they manage to sustain us. We can give language, we can describe them, but we don't know, we don't have the full grasp of like why it works the way that it does. We just know that it does, and we take it for granted. And this is why, again, like, you know, one of the things I grew up on was that everything we need to know about God is in this book, is in the Bible. Everything we need to know about the world is in this Bible. And that's not true. We know that the Bible's been edited and truncated and given in different versions. We know that the Bible, people say that the Bible is divinely inspired. So are my words. So are your words. This moment is what is. God and spirituality points to the underlying truth that governs and creates and flows through every single living being that is alive right now and has ever been alive on this planet. And it points to the predicament that we're in this moment. And I think spiritual texts often, at their best, they carry ancient wisdom about that interconnectedness. But they have to be interpreted, and they are being interpreted. They're being interpreted by often men with their own um, interests. Look at the Christian nationalists. Look at the evangelical American movement, white evangelicals, pastors taking pictures with guns and really committed to nation state concepts and promoting war and separating and hating gay people and trying to subjugate women, insisting that men are in some special category over women. This is not God. This is not what is. These are stories. These are more stories. God pulls us back to a place. Spirituality pulls us back to a place under the stories. All of the stories are stories. It pulls us to a place where you beyond words. It's the silence before the words. And too few people are willing to do the work, to be curious enough to look in the places that are that go underlooked, and to accept the fullness of this experience, like beyond what we've been taught, to not just receive things. Um, because that's where God is and that's what God is. I'm gonna have to tease this out a bit more, I think, in the next episode. But again, we've been talking about God this entire time. God is you. God is you in human form, grappling with this existence, growing, existing as an individuated being for a short period. And your perspective is part of the whole that makes God. The one thing that is. Check out the rest of these videos on my YouTube and subscribe. Um, Yeah, we'll continue this tomorrow. I see the God in you. Peace. See you tomorrow.